Welcome to the Be Dadly podcast, where we discuss all things dadly, from being an entrepreneur while caring for toddlers to raising screenagers and talking the birds and the bees. We're here to help you traverse the vast and dynamic landscape of fatherhood. Enjoy practical advice, lots of puns, and even a few heart-touching moments.
And the dad jokes are pretty good too.
And now your host, Brandon Jones.
So we're going to do something different today. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Welcome to Be Dadly, everybody.
Yes.
This is the show that we're doing. We rearranged the entire situation. We're doing a new set, new studio, new guests. It's all happening. We decided to sort of split the season and change it up with an interview from the guy who usually does the interviewing today. I'm John Prophet. I was in one of the other episodes, in case you missed it.
Yep.
This is Brandon Jones,
Hi.
founder of Be Dadly.
Welcome.
So, lots going on in the last season.
Yeah.
A lot of changes for everybody. What we wanted to do here today was really sort of talk about what was the impetus for doing this project, this Be Dadly project, why we're both so heavily invested in this thing. Mm-hmm. And so talk about some of that stuff and just probably go on a million different tangents as long as our equipment will allow us. Mm-hmm. And so let's really kind of begin. Oh, and some news in terms of your upgraded skill sets. I'd like to talk about that.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
So let's just talk about what your motivation is for doing this program, this upcoming training that we're looking to launch here soon, the course.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, like where this kind of comes from is I had a challenging experience as being a father. When I first got custody of my son, he was 5 years old and he was struggling. And I really lacked tools.
Now, how old were you?
I was 25 years old.
So you're 25.
Yeah, 25.
Custody of your 5-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
Sole custody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've had custody of him ever since. He's now 16. And yeah, it's basically, I just didn't have great tools. And what I had was a lot of the outdated old school tools, the grounding, the spanking, timeouts, nose in the corner. It was kind of built on this belief, like if I was firmer, you'd be better. Which I realized over time was not correct because I was super firm. I was probably, I was a heavy disciplinarian. I was very strict. If I said this is what would happen, that's what would happen. If I told you this was our agreement, whether you really, honestly, was it really an agreement? It was what I was saying. It was more like a binding contract that they didn't buy into.
They didn't have any buy-in.
Yeah, he had no buy-in. But at the same time, I was kind of enforcing those contracts on him.
Right.
And ultimately, I didn't get a behavior change. Yeah. And so what ended up happening is it was actually out of pure desperation, I started saying like, this isn't working, what else? Mm-hmm. And I started reading books and I started doing that pretty quickly. It was like maybe in like the first year, I was kind of like, I need a book. And I picked up Parenting with Love and Logic. And something did change. I did find, there were some tools in there and I did see a shift. And that actually got my hunger going for more tools. And there's a progression of me building up my parenting tools and his behavior working itself down as well. But there was also like him and I getting closer. Which I found was so important and was a missing piece, especially because I was visiting him, but I wasn't around a lot for the first 5 years of his life. So not having an attachment with me was a big part of the behavior and having to leave his mother.
Right.
I didn't realize any of that until going to therapy and talking to therapists and him seeing therapists and really kind of pulling that apart. I knew it was going to have an impact leaving his mom. That was obvious. But what kind of impact and what would the behavior be? Because he already had these behavior challenges when he came to me. So what maybe, me not having a presence in his life, maybe that was causing some behavior, issues. But essentially, it was the behavior issues. It was me finding out that I didn't have great tools, finding tools, and those tools changing my life. And then realizing how big of an impact it was really having. It wasn't just impacting my life with him, it would impact his children's life.
For sure.
It was actually impacting my relationship with my father. A lot of the stuff, and my mother, a lot of the stuff I was doing in the therapy and stuff ended up drawing up stuff from my own upbringing.
Right.
And then I also realized that I was impacting my immediate community with things I was learning and things like that. And so when I add all that together, and also when you think about the father context of like our impact on society, and being in the home, and you look at the stats and you see how important fathering is, you realize if I didn't have enough reason with my own son, you add all the other layers, my gosh, there's so many reasons to do this. And so it's a thing I'm really excited about, and it's become a passion for me, a passion project. And I really think this kind of thing could have impact. I mean, if we can help fathers out there pick up tools that bring their children closer, get more cooperation, more respect, that help them through the society that is really challenged in many unhealthy ways, from digital addiction to straight up addictions with sugar, and then obviously the other addictions that, I feel like there's enough talked about drugs, but what about the digital addiction? What about the sugar? What about the carbs? There is enough addiction and issues that we already have to work through. If I can help a dad manage his relationship, his communication, and get the cooperation and respect from his children without being punitive or being forceful and overpowering our children, we can actually get our children to look inwards to validate themselves and what they think and feel, and ask themselves what matters to them, and I can get all that together, then I'm making a dent. And I keep saying I because that's why I'm doing it, but honestly, I think of it more as like we have a challenge as fathers. Yeah. You and I are called to this project, I think, because we see our kids and we want a better world for them. Yeah. And this is a way to do it. This is a part of it. Yeah. And so that's really why.
I think it's interesting, knowing a little bit about your own story and your own fathering, and our fathers. I won't say, I can't speak to your father, but I won't say mine did the best he could. I think a lot of times people say that as a way to sort of, just cut themselves some slack or something, and it's the past is the past. There's nothing to be done about that. But I know for myself, like fathering is probably the one few areas that I actually do always try to do my best, and I don't reach that mark very often, but it is one of the areas where I can genuinely say I really am trying to do my best in this area, because for me it feels really, really significant because of my own relationship or lack thereof with my own father. Mm-hmm. So I love this passion for getting the skills and breaking that sort of chain of less than ideal parenting. And but one of the things that really struck me is that one of the things that you said that you didn't, and this was in another podcast, one of the things that you didn't like to hear, but that was really significant in your life was figure it out. Mm-hmm. And so here's a 25-year-old kid with a 5-year-old dumped on him out of nowhere, kind of, right?
Yeah, no, it was within a week. I was told him, I need to come pick him up.
Right, and which is a daunting challenge when you think about it, if you've ever been in any kind of situation like that. I mean, even if somebody dumps a puppy on you, it's like, wait, I'm not equipped for this. So imagine a 5-year-old, and the fact that, that component of your own parenting from your father clearly reared its head in that, I got to figure this shit out. Figure it out, because there are a lot of other things you could have done, a lot of other ways you could have handled it. Right. And for some reason in there was this thing of I'm not going to just keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Obviously, I'm not going to, it doesn't feel like you took a half-assed approach. It feels like if there was something in you that was I got to solve this problem, which may have spoke to the gravity of the problem at the time,
There's that, and there's the visceral experience of when something works, and the pressure that's behind it. That when that releases, you're like, I need more of those. That tool was so much more effective.
So valid.
And the pressure has been there, from the school, for example. Hey, we really need your son to, cooperate. Like we're not able to teach our class.
Right.
The student body is actually, they're being harmed in a way because there's so much distraction and there's so much misbehavior, and it stirs up so many other activities in kids. We're not able to facilitate an education here with your child's behavior. We need to solve this. What are you guys doing at home? And there's just so much pressure. The teachers, the principals, and then the personal, I sometimes felt like I was failing as a dad. I don't have, my kid's not, respectful. He's not behaving, as you would see on the Brady Bunch or something, right? Like this picture perfect behavior isn't there. And so there was also that pressure as well. And so then when something worked, I was like, oh man, that was night and day. I didn't yell. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And so, I didn't do the typical things. And when it worked, it made me hungry, and so that was a part of it too.
So kind of based on the new information that you've attained over the past couple of weeks, right, with your program that you were involved in and what you've already established, can you talk me through some of the highlights, I guess, or the main points? And I want to just stress, being a dad, and I've kind of come up with that tagline. It's soul work, and so ultimately, it's like if you're not doing your own work and you're just trying to implement these external little tactics or strategies or techniques, but you're not, basically internalizing that stuff and really looking at how can I become a better example? Because so many of these things the behaviors are so example based.
We have mirror neurons.
Yeah.
And they'll model exactly what the energy
and
is.
they'll model the subconscious is what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
It's like, okay, you try on the surface to adopt or showcase certain behavior patterns, always be polite, whatever, say thank you and please and, manners and da-da-da. But there's also this layer of what is your lifestyle? If you're preaching to this kind of ideal, but what you do on a day-to-day basis, whether it's your food habits or your exercise or lack of exercise habits, or just what you value, what's really valuable and how you show up in the world. And so, I always question dads like Willie Nelson, so that motherfucker's never around. He's always on the road, but he's the coolest dude, right?
Right,
and
totally.
all of us benefited, probably, all of us who appreciate his music and his work and people like him, but if you spoke to the kids, you might get a very different story, and so you have to kind of come to terms with that of balancing, I'm in the mode right now because I started so late with having my son that I had really knocked off so many bucket list things. I wasn't necessarily and I still have goals and ambitions and things that I want to achieve, but a lot of that angsty, driven sort of thing is not so much. So I really feel like fathering is kind of the top priority right now, so, and I think about that. I don't think I've got to go do this career thing so that I can. It's no. But then at the same time, I do have my passions. I do have the things that I create and build and work on and more of that. And so I kind of go back and forth. And this was kind of one of the initial things we were talking about with your program of balancing the professional life with the personal, the fathering relationship, and really setting boundaries around that and what that looks, because it's so personal. Yeah. Some dads are just, man, I just want to be dad. I don't really give a shit about any of this other stuff. Mom takes care of that,
right.
And then some are I want to have a connection with my kids. I want to have a deeper thing, but I also am really passionate. And if that's true, that that's great. I would just sort of caution against I have to do all this stuff because my boss or because of the life situation I've created. Like if you're sort of being led around by these external forces and you're thinking I have to do this for my kid, you're kind of losing the plot. Like the kid needs you, and like adjust your life accordingly, as opposed to like thinking you got to go outside to do all these things to, account for this lifestyle that you've created.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's two things. Like I think it's like it's both, right? Because we're self-actualizing and we're also trying to raise a child.
Yeah.
And so both are super important. I think that the trouble that we find ourselves in, like especially like in this modern world, is the hustle mentality, the hustle culture. Back in the day, you were a farmer or something like that. You had your children with you, all the time.
All the time.
They were learning hard work because you were demonstrating it. But today, when you're, for example, the kid goes to school and you're sitting in a house, they don't know what you did all day. Right. And when you go to the office, we don't see our fathers working the same way. I think has an impact. But it is so important to keep self-actualizing, because you want your children to also embody self-actualization and think of what they value and demonstrating that as well. But you said something earlier too, that about highlighting some of the things that we learn. And by the way, this workshop that I did is actually, I wanted to be certified in it because I've loved it for so long. Right. It's actually not new information to me. It was just a facilitation of my certification. Yeah. I loved this stuff for so long. Yeah. And I'm going all the way back to it's not just about them changing. I had to do the work. You were saying we have to embody it. Yeah. I literally know that my son didn't just need to change. It wasn't that he just needed better behavior. Right. He just needed to acquire these new skills. Right. I had to change. Right. I had to change my behavior in order for his behavior to be invited to change. Right. And one of the core tenets of positive discipline, which is the certification that I got, but also the book that I read long ago that really had one of the biggest impacts on me, is this idea that we really can't change anyone. This, I think, goes back to Adlerian psychology. We can't change anyone. What we can change is ourselves and you can change the environment. You have a lot of control over the environment. And so you can use those two things. Both of those can be leverage for you. And for me, it was, what do I need to change in me that will create a new output in him? And that, I feel like, that really is the different approach. Yeah. One approach, you're saying, what can I change in them to get them to do better? Right. The other approach is saying, what can I say differently? Yeah. And actually, even better, what can I ask differently? Yeah. Especially when we're inviting change, we're looking for something to come up in our child, and this is some of the work. So highlighting some of the work we did is facilitating. Mm-hmm. Facilitating an experience as opposed to being didactic and telling them and teaching them. Yeah. Facilitating an experience where the lesson is learned through the experience. Right. And life is a great teacher. Yeah. And in many ways, if we allow our children to experience things and we are their consultant, rather, if you've ever been around like somebody who, like I think of like a person like a Wayne Dyer or like a Dalai Lama, or you read Buddha's work, or you read these people who come to this elevated experience. Yeah. They're really not. Even though they're kind of a sage, they're really not super forward with it. They're actually drawing out of a lot of it. They're kind of like inviting your own curiosity. Mm-hmm. Like you might ask them a question and they ask another question to you. Right. And that's very common, I think. And I think that is kind of also our role, is to try to help keep drawing out those things in our children. Yeah. And children really appreciate that. Yeah. And, they really respect that, and it's much more supportive as opposed to authoritative, which you have to be sometimes. But for the most part, being there as someone who's here to shepherd them and help is a little different than thinking that they're a nuisance and you must destroy their behavior.
Right? Yeah. Quash the bad.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things I feel like is a really important thing to take away, or I guess to recall, is fortunately I have a fair about, not a ton, but enough memories, and I try and remain cognizant of my own dynamics with my mother. So I had a very authoritative single mom situation, and I was the oldest, 10 years difference between me and the next one. So I was basically the surrogate dad, the older brother, the surrogate husband emotionally, holding space for all of that. So there's a lot of weight in that. And I remember just feeling no sense of agency. Yeah. I had no real sense. I very rarely felt a sense of agency. And so the times when I did were basically the times where, it was like when you were a kid growing up, at least where I was, you leave in the morning and you just are gone out in the wilderness all day. That's what I did. Me and my friends were just out playing all day long. No supervision. It's kind of amazing, because like I don't think with my son, living in the city, like I just no, it's not even an option, I know. But I would like to be in a place where trying to be in that situation. But I just remember thinking like I'd never felt heard. It was always this like, better, you're the boss, you're the, and I felt like I had something to contribute to that, and that I had something to say about my own whatever, my own choices, my own life, like what even as a little guy, and so I think about that with my son, Miles, I'd be attentive to that. Like, okay, what is he trying to get at here? Like, what does he need to express? Where is he not feeling heard? Where is he not feeling empowered? And it's like, and you can't always do that. We just had a conversation with one of our friends, one of his best friend's mom, and, she's getting around to this realization, like, you're the kid, right? So, and I remember saying this to my ex, and her sister had kids, and it was like, and she eventually wanted to have kids, and I wasn't ready to do that. But she said, we go and visit the family, and it's like the kids were just, and they're both girls, but it was just like the kids said jump, and the parents said how high, and I'm like, no wonder no one wants to have kids anymore, because it's like if this is the dynamic, you just can't. It's intolerable to me. Like I'm just not going to be that. And I found myself probably more accommodating in many ways, because you love your child. In some ways, probably that maybe aren't ultimately good for him, right. Where there is a value in the way that we were raised, because it gave us this spark to look at it and say, how can we do this better? And then you realize, like, there are some things that were done that were probably the best choice, because A, that's the dynamic, the parent-child, where you have to lay down the law. You have to set these parameters. You have to give them a container. Yeah. And has been this sort of movement of just allow child-led, and it's like, that's great to a point. And if you don't have discernment and you're working through your own shit as a parent, like, oh, but I don't want to, my parents were so strict, I don't want to be strict, and you swing so hard the other way, trying to throw out everything, that's just as bad. You create a bunch of entitled little, monsters that end up being adult monsters who think the world operates around them.
Yes. There's this entitlement movement, and then there's also, something that you're also stirring up for me was this idea that we can't disappoint our children.
Right. Right.
It's so interesting. Like some of the things I think that are fun, like we tend to oscillate as people. Yeah. If you don't think we oscillate, go to a hotel room where you're not familiar with the shower and turn it on hot, try to get it on hot, and then it's too hot. Right. And you're way too cold. Yeah. You're like, Jesus, why can't I get it? Because we oscillate. We overcorrect. Yeah. And I do think that there's an issue with the modern way of child rearing, in that we've gotten to this place where we have become too permissive, and we have invited the entitlement because we reward for everything. Yeah. So then if I reward for everything, then to do just what's expected, I expect a reward. Yeah. Can you do the dishes? Well, how much are you going to pay me? Are you kidding me? Right. You live in this house. Yeah. Right. So one of the things that, I don't believe in rewarding. And I think that I could go on about it, but the main thing is that we don't reward children for normal behavior.
Right.
If it's a contribution to the house, and Amy McCready is one that opened me up to this, and I just love it. There's a contribution to the home, it's a contribution to your family, or it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
There's no reward.
Right.
The
That
reward,
is its own
the
reward.
reward is doing the right thing or contributing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's one thing that helps with the entitlement piece.
Yeah.
When it comes, well, people will say, well, what about allowance? I believe, and Amy McCready also is the person who opened me up to this, you should give allowance.
Yeah.
It should be a fixed allowance, depending on their age, that allows them to spend money, invest money, do those things. But it wasn't for anything other than them getting familiar with how to use money. You're going to get a little bit, you're going to get a set amount each week. How do you manage it?
Yeah.
And I think that's really valuable. The next thing is the disappointment piece. We don't allow our children to be disappointed. That is a problem.
Yeah.
Okay? Life, I'm not going to say by and large, because it can be quite wonderful.
Right.
But there's a large part of life
Certainly
that is disappointing.
Yeah.
There's so many times your electronics aren't going to work the way you want them to. We had that happen today.
Right.
There's so many times you're going to wish you had a job and you don't get it.
Yeah.
You're not always going to get what you want.
Yeah.
And that's a very important lesson that we used to learn.
Right.
That today we try to plug the hole.
Yeah.
You know, oh, well, you didn't get what you want. Let me throw an iPad in there.
Right.
Really? Would that really help them?
Compensate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think not enough parents are listening to the Stones, you know, because it's like they said it early on.
Yes, they did.
You can't always get what you want.
Yes,
You know, there's a lot of wisdom in those great rock and roll
Absolutely.
songs. So,
Oh my
like, come on, guys, get
Well,
it together. If you listen
there's
to
a
Britney
whole-
Spears, you're never going to learn these
We could
lessons.
listen to or do a whole podcast on because I grew up with classic rock, and
Yeah,
I'm really like I need lyrics to have meaning.
something? Yeah.
Oh my gosh! And if it's meaningless, I can't stand it.
Trash.
I
Don't even
really
get me started
struggle.
on
I mean,
that.
I can enjoy ambient music or music that is that's meant to move you without words. I can enjoy that, or it has some kind of weird words that you don't even know what, but it's like getting you. But when it really is lyrics that are just trash lyrics, and I think that is a problem with we've gotten kids addicted to that stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's the
we
fast.
will see the consequence of it.
Yeah, I look at that as it's fast. We are a fast food culture.
Right.
We spoon feed them trash, like from what goes into their mouths to what goes into their ears to what goes into their eyes, and the whole culture is basically predicated on that throwaway, disposable nonsense. This, you know, and a lot of people are engaged in it, and it's like, if you don't understand the significance of that, try cutting it out for a week and see how you roll and see how your kids roll, you know, and you'll see also the resistance to doing that, which is a clear sign of addiction, right? So I think that's super important. I mean, that, again, we could go down a rabbit hole on that. The idea of letting your kids fail, like this whole notion of like getting, you know, a trophy for participation, obviously nonsense. Like failure is the most significant teacher. I have caught myself trying to mitigate that experience, you know, but then I'm like, no, you need to lean into that. I mean, I'll tell you, the reason why I got to be such a good guitar player, so I got a scholarship to it was a junior college, but I got a scholarship within 2 years of really starting to play guitar seriously. And that's because I started playing guitar literally months into that. My teacher ropes me into the jazz band, which I have no business playing. I'm a junior in high school, barely started playing guitar, and I'm supposed to be playing these jazz charts, and even easy jazz charts to a kid who's been playing for a couple of months are difficult things. And then, you know, you have your seasonal concert. And so I get up there on stage and I'm just horrific. I'm just like terrible from top to bottom. There's not a good thing about it. And I felt terrible. And like afterwards, I could tell everybody knew I was terrible. And like my friend who was a drummer, who was much more competent than I was on his instrument, you know, was like, Mick, you sounded so good. And, you know, and then they'd be like, John, it's good to see you, you know. I could just feel all of that. And so that failure was such a motivator for me that I spent the next 2 years basically very disciplined, very consistent, but it didn't even feel like effort because it was such a fire inside me. I would come home from school, I would borrow the amp, I'd literally carry this PV bandit from home or from school to home, which is not it was like walking probably about a quarter of a mile with this freaking amp and my guitar, and like taking that home and playing and practicing like 8 hours. I'd come home and just practice like through the night until it was time to go to bed. Have my mom like slide food under the door like I was an inmate or something, and but in that time I just rocketed in terms of my skill set.
And that failure you experienced
was the fuel. Like, because if they would have been like trying to give me love and like it was all boostering to my ego around that kind of stuff, there would have been nothing there. It would have been like, I think there would have been still, because I knew that I sucked.
Yeah.
So, and I think, that's that whole story of you're your own worst critic. I was aware, but I think the humiliation, right? Like, it's not just the failure. It's
let that happen again.
It's the humiliation that was the motivator for me to just go hard and be like, okay, that's not happening again.
Yeah. And I think it's funny. It's like there's...
But how, to say like, I want my kid to be humiliated, like, right?
Oh,
it's like, it's not that you want that, but it's like, and it's not like you were going to create that. You don't want to facilitate that, but it's like, if it happens,
that's right.
Let's use this as fuel as opposed to letting it crush us.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny. It's like, especially with failure, there's so many that are afraid of failure. And we actually need to kind of rewrite the script.
Yeah.
You're going to fail. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sucks to fail. And you have more attempts.
Yeah.
It's not over till it's over.
Right.
And actually, the truth is, and this is the fundamental reason you got to accept it, you won't have any success. No success without failure. Right. You won't learn to ride a bike without wrecking. A bike, that's one of the most easy, simple things that most people will learn in their lifetime. Right. Almost everyone will learn to ride a bike. You didn't learn to ride a bike without failure.
Yeah.
The first couple times, it didn't make sense. It got on, and the brake was hitting, you didn't know. It always is like that. It's like that in everything you do. So let's just get on with it.
Yeah.
Let's be okay. I like saying mistakes is a mistake.
Right.
Let's retake that.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Totally.
Right? Like sometimes, another thing, when I started doing some of the personal work like we were talking about, and we were talking about failures, and I feel like I forgot one thing because I said there was two things. There's the fact that we don't allow failure to happen. We have a fear of failure. And then the other side of it is basically just constantly, trying to keep our kids from feeling pain. Right. Feeling like we talked about disappointment. Yeah. And I really love another thing about that Jane Nelson and Lynn Lott with Positive Discipline is the statement of I love you and I have faith that you can deal with disappointment.
Yeah.
I actually believe that you're capable of handling that.
Yeah.
That is actually an empowering statement, even if it's doesn't like you might be angry about the situation, but you're not angry at the person.
Right.
Like, I appreciate that.
Right.
They love me and they have faith that I can handle disappointment.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great line you can use with your children when they are disappointed. I love you and I have faith that you can handle disappointment.
Yeah.
It's going to happen a lot in life. Right. This is good for you.
Yeah.
Totally good. So great script for a child.
Take me through some of the contents of this course that you're creating for Be Dadly.
Oh, yeah. So first of all, I want to start by helping people understand themselves and their children's motivations for why they behave the way they do. Yeah. From their personality types, from understanding what drives behavior in children. Again, a lot of this goes back to Adlerian psychology. Just understanding what is happening so that we're not so reactive and we can kind of start to get a bigger picture. Yeah. Because it can be so, we can get to a point where we're reactive parenting.
Yeah.
And then we don't really know how to help our child. And I've been in that place where I'm like, I have no idea how to help him. He's a mess. Yeah. Nothing I seem to do works. And so I want to help dads first, look at a bigger picture. What is a child, what drives a lot of their behavior? And then also, where do you fit in that? How is your personality, for example, impacting their behavior and what's driving
your habits.
And do you know that about yourself?
Self-awareness.
And so actually, if you want, you could take a quiz on our website called the Dadly Disposition Quiz and learn how your disposition impacts your parenting. Shameless plug. So there's that piece. That's a big part of it. The other thing is because this course is going to be about power struggles.
Right.
If you face challenges with your child and you're trying to get them to behave and you just keep getting that butted head, how can we create and facilitate an experience where that's not the case? Like your relationship isn't about dominating each other and the child showing I do have power, but it's more about cooperation. How can we actually get what we both need? How can sometimes we deal with disappointment and both be ready to do it? Because also if we say, for example, you got to be able to handle disappointment, we get disappointed in our child. Did we model that we were disappointed? So we had to, it's kind of taking and doing the real work, being willing to do the work and say, hey, I can't control him or her, but I can control me. Even though sometimes that's very challenging too. And I control the environment. So there's that piece. The other parts of it is like giving them practical tools. So like a script, when things aren't going right, what would you say? And, when the child is being, disruptive or is challenging authority or is just blatantly not doing what they said they'll do, they're not following through, or does keep nagging me whenever I ask them, please allow me to do my work or whatever it is. What do I do? So it's just some very practical things. This is what you can do. And then there's the experiential piece. Let's actually do an experience. And the certification I just got is actually about facilitating experiential lessons. It's for a parent to get the visceral experience and the shift inside is like, oh, that makes so much more sense by experiencing something. And so in our group coaching, we're going to be doing that. We're going to be talking about the lesson, but then we'll also go right into an experience that helps embody that lesson. And I think it's going to be huge. It's going to be it's been game changing for me. So many of us want the same things with our children. You looked at like a list of like the characteristics and the kind of life skills that we want children to have. We're very familiar with that list, and then the challenges. We're super familiar with the challenges. These are all the challenges that we experience with our child, and children. I mean, these are very common challenges, from defiance to nagging to negotiating to, it's very, we know the list.
It's not unique to any individual parent.
All that unique. And so then one of the things we can do, for example, is we can then look at how we respond to an interaction and then ask ourselves, did what the actions that we took, did it help them acquire such skills? Or a good example, for example, is like, if I tell my child, you will do this or I will take that. Okay? Very common practice. I did it. I took away all of his video games. These are privileges, not rights. Right? This is very familiar. So, and it's true. All of it's true. And it makes sense because you're like, I'm not giving you you're a brat. I'm not giving you all this stuff if you're going to misbehave and make our family go through this kind of stress. So it logically it makes sense, right? But then when our child gets upset and they lash out and they take away something or they basically act out with revenge, we go, that's not right. And we're like, why? It's like, well, because we totally embodied a little bit of revenge. Where we're like, I'm going to get you back for your misbehavior. And it's often unrelated, disrespectful. It's like they're not correlated all the time, Because you hit your sister, you're not getting ice cream. Okay. And so it's that kind of stuff. So then you go back to the list and you say, if you looked at the list, for example, of challenges, my child is, defiant, my child is, aggressive or whatever the things might be. And then you look at the life skills like critical thinking, I want them to be kind, empathetic and everything like that. When we reacted to the child's misbehavior and we went back to that list, it would be obvious to you that you didn't help the child acquire any of those. In fact, you invited more of the challenges. You invited them to be more defiant. Right. Because, for example, Jon, if you had something go awry, like something, it was work related, you got kind of frustrated with somebody. So let's imagine that you had something happen at work, and you let someone have it, right? You really, you didn't, you weren't able to manage your emotions as maybe as well as you'd like to.
Sure. I can see that happening.
And then your superior calls, your wife or calls somebody in your home.
Yeah.
And they basically tell them, Jon did this today.
Yeah.
If he keeps it up, he's fired.
Right.
And they're telling that person at home. Okay. And then you go home, and instead of that person saying, hey, what happened? And not from like, what happened today at school,
right.
but like, dude, are you okay?
Yeah.
Like, I'm genuinely like, what happened?
Right.
And then they don't ask you, they don't have this position of they actually are curious if you're okay.
Right.
And they have this position of like, well, I know what you did. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Like, I already know. And then they were to come at you and they were to say, listen, I don't think you're going to get any whatever. I think you just need to sleep in the other room tonight. Right. Look, I'm not, it's over. I'm not doing anything for you tonight.
Yeah.
Whatever special privileges you think you were going to get, you're not having them.
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you a question. How cooperative and excited would you be to help that person that just did that to you?
Right. Not very at all, for sure. Yeah.
So when our children are at school and they're having their time, right, whatever their experience is, and a teacher gets onto them and they get defensive and they get their feelings hurt.
Yeah.
Because it can also be humiliating in class to get someone to get onto you. Now everybody's looking at you. They get their feelings hurt. And especially depending on how frustrated the teacher was. Right. And I'm not trying to not be empathetic with teachers. Dude.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I got empathy.
Yeah.
It's not like I couldn't do it. Yeah. So it's not like I'm trying to say like they got an easy job. But what I'm saying is like, but if they were to, for example, say something that they got a little hurt themselves and they ended up lashing out. Right. Now the child's hurt, they respond with anger or upset. Now they get written up and they come home. And then I come from this place of angry at them. Yeah. And I don't validate their feelings. I don't really genuinely ask. I ask what happened today, but more like I'm actually trying to bait them in to trap them. Right. So that I can punish them. Right. How cooperative is that child really going to be? Mm-hmm. Does it make them want to say, I can't wait to help you, Dad? Yeah. Right? Yeah, of course. And yet that is the trap. I fell in that trap over and over and over. And I was like, the moment he leaves my sight, he's manipulative. He goes out and he basically becomes this other individual. Yeah. And he's wreaking havoc on everyone. Right. He's creating mayhem everywhere he goes. And then, he's coming back, I'm an angel. He's not. Yeah. He's not an angel. But the idea is, were my actions inviting challenges or inviting character skills and life skills?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like genuinely solution-based, which is like, to your point, like building character around these subjects is the solution as opposed to just being punitive. And I think you can see this, like what you were talking about earlier, was just having a redo on so much of the language, like, because you see this structurally. I mean, it's like you said, the corporate structure, the governmental structure. There's always the entire sort of civilization is this sort of exalted form of parentification, where somebody always knows better than you. We saw this the last 2 years, right? Somebody knows better than me. This guy in the white lab coat knows better than me. Like these guys in the suits at the, with the flags behind them, they know better than me. Like that whole mentality of just giving your power away is woven into the fabric of the country, and the way we are raised, and never, like, there's a really great book by Bill Plotkin called The the descent into soul, I think. And really, one of the points he makes is like, we're not even a civilization of, like, forget elders, like that sort of respect for the elders or the reverence for the wisdom of the elders. And it's like, the reason why you don't have that is because we're not really elders. Even the old people are not really elders. Like, what you have is a bunch of old adolescents, like, and they've not even gone to like the furthest degree of that. So like his whole book and his whole message is about creating at least adults, like spiritual adults, and ideally elders who are the kind of people who you naturally respect because they're solution providers. Like, they have, the bearer of scars, and they have walked through the fire and done these things and solved these problems and come out the other side, and they have something to share with us. And like inviting that, like you said, in being inviting that in and learning the easy way, as opposed to just like banging our head against the wall and trying to rediscover things people already knew for thousands of years but lost because of a kind of a consumer, fast food culture. So I think what you're speaking to is so like deeply woven. And so when we're talking about doing this kind of work as a father, I mean, that is the leadership position. Like, what you're doing is not just maybe breaking generational cycles in our own family lineage, but I mean, it's a big statement, but really sending the ripple of breaking cultural cycles, of breaking these cultural cycles that have been going on for decades, longer, but easily decades, that haven't brought us to a better place, like as people. And we have more technology and blah, 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 blah. I mean, but like that doesn't make for a better civilization as we are seeing the results and the fruits of now. Like, if you look out into what's happening in terms of culture and governments collapsing and mismanagement, the trust in all of these sort of establishments is like at an all-time low. So it's like, we have to earn that, obviously, and we have to earn that as parents by representing a reason to give that trust, not just because we're there and because we say so, right?
Or just because we're older.
Right.
I mean, that's the
taller.
That's the funny. Yeah, we're taller, we're bigger, we're competent.
Yeah.
When you're little, we seem so.
Struggling.
We're like, wow. Kids look at us and like, wow, they can do so much. But I mean, you look at the leadership that's been demonstrated, especially and things are changing fast. Yeah. So, I've got empathy for them as well, as things change so rapidly. But you can see a lack of leadership. Right. You can see a lack of character in these people. You can see some adolescents when you see the way that they argue. Yeah. The way they debate, the way they, and I mean, I'm just saying this.
Across the board.
This is not putting out one particular character or another. Yeah. I mean, it really is. And I'm also not saying that I'm capable of necessarily being there, because there's been so much modeling.
Right.
We've come a culture where we yell at each other, where we say, where we get, now they create videos of them basically trash talking. Right. And the trash talking goes back and forth. Right. And
virtual trash talking.
Yeah. There isn't a lot of value virtues embodied.
Yes.
And I totally agree with you. And I think, some of the work that we're doing is trying to draw more of that out. Yeah. And I think part of what's missing too is like our appreciation and reverence for the wisdom that we have. The wisdom that children have. It's really interesting. Children a lot of times have a very pure form of wisdom. Totally. They can tell you what's right or wrong. Yeah. They can feel it. Mm-hmm. And I really believe you look at, for example, applied kinesiology, which we had Charles on, and what a cool guest. And he's really talking about like how does these, traumas, and you're looking at things like, how's this going to impact your body? And, so you look at our body knows, the body knows. Yeah. And children are able to respond with that knowing, where we sometimes have we put so many layers and filters and things over it.
A lot of it's pre-verbal,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
it's intuitive and somatic.
And so then we can kind of come out and come distort it out of us.
Yeah.
So when we, for example, ask versus tell our children certain things, and I'm not saying we give them, this is not saying that they have unlimited options.
Right.
You can actually ask between two options that you're okay with both.
Yeah.
Again, you could facilitate the environment.
Right.
You have control over the environment of what choices they do have.
Yeah.
But to ask as opposed to tell them and to help draw out. Now, the reason I think that the standard approach of the punishment worked is because you can get an immediate response.
Right.
Sometimes a child out of fear, a short-term solution, you can get that short-term payoff, but it comes with a long-term cost.
Right.
And when we look at...
Do you think it does, though, if it's used on rare occasions?
So, like, for example, generally we never had it, but whenever they need to lay down the law, they lay down the law.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't traumatic. I wasn't traumatized because I had a great upbringing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't necessarily think it has as much of an impact, but at the same time,
If you
it's
have
still
better option.
I think for a lot of people out there, it's like someone I know used to say this: if they knew how to be better, they would be better.
Yeah.
And to some of that, I do agree. Although sometimes we know and we don't do. So
Woven into our...
it's true. If you had better tools, you would probably use them.
Yeah.
Right. Like if I'm trying, to screw in something and it's not working, you hand me a power tool and it works, so I'm like, I'm going to use that again.
Yeah.
So yeah, people will use better tools, but as far
And I think what you said too, sorry to interrupt, but I think what you said too earlier was like your early experience was you wouldn't be on this path if that shit failed. Right. You would have pivoted into these different, because I continued to try to get, because what you were trying to get at is a solution. And ultimately, that's, I think, what everybody's trying to get at. And some people constantly in this culture, I think, are trying to look at the fastest route. That's the whole thing of like, take this pill and you'll lose all that excess fat and, this sort of quick fix kind of culture. And it doesn't actually solve.
I think there was a parenting book called like 1, 2, 3 Magic or whatever.
Yeah.
It's that kind of idea. Like if we could just get it done quickly.
And so I think it just kind of speaks to that, but and also it speaks to this like power dynamic of always, we're constant in this constant negotiation with, we're trying to get what we want. So it's our egos, our will to power, right? Mm-hmm. And then we're trying to get the accommodation or cooperation of this other little being who wants to get what they want. And so it really is, and that's right. I mean, I think that's why, even though, they're not intellectually necessarily developed yet to have that, but like even the art of negotiation is a great piece of material to like dive into to help sort of understand just the natural inclination towards that relationship of negotiating to an end that both can agree on, both can settle on. Whether they've gotten everything they want or not, at least they both feel like they've gotten something out of the deal.
Well, it's funny. It's like we want our children to kind of be more like adults. Right. And they want us to be more like children.
Kids, right.
And my therapist used to say it's kind of the situation where I want chocolate, you want vanilla, so we both get strawberry.
Right.
The better way, in my opinion, is sometimes I get chocolate and sometimes you get vanilla.
Right.
There are times you want your children to follow a certain standard.
Yeah.
What your children would like from you, and a lot of times many of us haven't even thought about it, is for you to operate with a lot of presence and to let go, to let loose, to be caught up in a moment, which we almost never are.
Right.
We're always preoccupied, whether it's with our phone or with our work or with our duties or with making dinner. There's so many things to do.
Yeah.
But that's not what our children want, especially younger children who are really tapped in.
Right.
Well, as they get older, they get preoccupied too.
Totally.
So then we kind of start to feel like, well, we're all just doing our own thing.
Right.
When really we're all just not present.
Yeah.
That's more real.
Yeah.
And then you try to get your teenager to come play a family game and they're like, oh my God.
It's the last thing I want to do.
Yeah. Well, we've all been practicing being preoccupied and not being present for so long. It says this thing feels uncomfortable. And when you look at the dopamine pump we carry around with us, the game is so slow. and the payoff is so little in comparison. But so I think we can do this if we start earlier. It's better. I think with this, but it's never too late. I'll say this: even with my son, for example, my older teenager may not always go with me or do certain things, but I think he appreciates the invite. I think he does. But this idea of being really present, when you are willing to give your children what they want, I'm not saying they are immediately ready to give you what you want, but they're more open to it. And if you actually train them, like you actually take the time to say, so when we're at home and it's this time or whatever, it's totally cool for us to behave this way. But when we're in a restaurant and we're eating with others, that's not how we behave. And there's a certain standard that the restaurant requires of all of us. And if that standard isn't met, we leave. And then you hold that line. And you be really real with them. You train them on it. And actually what's kind of fun, and I haven't ever done it with Cohen, but he does really well at restaurants. And he does know the we will leave, and he knows I mean it. Because I did have to do it in grocery stores. With the grocery stores, it took me a few times to say, this is the standard of the grocery store. If you don't meet it, we have to go outside until you are ready. And if we don't have time, we have to leave. And that's the way this goes. And I mean, it took, I think, 2 times. And he was like, dude, why are we outside? We're outside because of your behavior. And then he was like, oh, I can do it again. I can. And what was so interesting to me, too, is he didn't necessarily want to be at the grocery store. But he hated it. He's like,
if we're going to be here, we should be shopping,
you're going to take that from me? So, the failure met with a real consequence changed his behavior. I just held the line. And it wasn't vengeful because I told him, hey,
facts of the matter.
Look, it wasn't like I was like, and it was related. It's not like, hey, since you didn't behave at this grocery store, when you get home, we're not doing blank. Well, that's so delayed, right? And with a child, delayed stuff kind of doesn't work very well. It's kind of like with a puppy and potty training. If you pop the puppy when you get home after they potty, they don't really know what happened. You came in the house and just started beating me, So anyways, not that you should pop puppies, but you know what I mean. Rub their nose in it, and they're like, I know what it is. What's going on? So anyways, I really do believe that giving a child what they want, which is that child presence, that play, that letting loose, and then helping them understand what we want in other environments and saying, sometimes I do this with you and sometimes you do that with me, and that's how we all get our needs met, I think is really important. But the only reason I say is because I think sometimes we overlook, what do our children want? What are they asking of us that we're not giving them? And I think if you do that day on and day in, why would they cooperate with you? You haven't given them anything they want all week.
Totally, cumulative.
Relationships can get that way.
With your kids, with your partner, with all of it. That's one of the things that I really understood about the intimate part of the relationship once my son was born was because, you tend to put so much emphasis on the child. Both parties are putting so much emphasis on the child, and if they're not conscientious enough, which most people aren't because they don't, like I said in a previous podcast, don't work on their relationship skills. They just think it's all natural and it's all works, right? This is what we've been doing, but not well, and not in the civilization that we currently occupy, which is a total distraction machine. So it's like if you don't really make set aside time for all of these relationships, whether it's friendships, your intimate relationships, the communication with your business partners, your kids, obviously, it's like the communication. This is such a foundational skill set. And I mean, I think really what you're speaking to, it's like, obviously, it's kind of like a good cleanse can solve a lot of problems. Really, really learning solid communication skills. I have a friend who does NVC. He's really involved in the nonviolent communication community, And it's huge, transformative for people.
Helping someone understand what you need and value, and asking them if they're willing to help you get it, is a better approach than saying every time you always do the blank. You never are. Huge generalization. And that happens a lot in parent-child relationship. You are always ... fill in the blank. Oh, you never
Yeah.
Right? I can't stand when instead of saying, hey, I really value peace and quiet
Right.
at a certain hour.
Right.
Can you help me figure out how we can do that? What are your ideas of how you can have fun, which is what you want,
Right.
and I have peace and quiet? How can we do that?
Yeah.
If I have some ideas. What are your ideas? Mm-hmm. Children are. This is the other thing. They're pretty creative,
Right.
and there are a lot of times we've allowed like creative solutions, and sometimes we're like, oh, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
But hey, a child will buy in where they had weigh-in.
Yeah.
Let them throw it out there so that they at least try.
Yeah.
Right? And, this morning we were trying to get one thing I wanted to say is I want every dad to know I am not like a perfect dad. Like I make mistakes all the time. And there's a great someone in this and I've heard this before in another book, but someone in the workshop was saying, actually it was the facilitator, she said, if you are in the Hall of Fame in baseball, you're batting a .33. That's what you're batting. That's the batting ratio that you have, a .33. So that's to make it to the Hall of Fame.
Right.
The greatest of the greats.
Yeah.
And I think with parenting, and that was their analogy too, is that if you're getting it right 1 out of 3 times,
Right.
and you're making a repair, on maybe one of the other 2, or hopefully 2, but you're making a repair, dude, you're doing it.
Yeah.
And that's all we really need to ask, because I can tell you, it's going back and repairing when you didn't do it right.
Yeah.
It helps close those loops.
Totally.
And it helps, even if you go back and it's been a while, it really does help close the loop. One of the things that helped me shift. So in a couple different programs, you have to go back and make repairs. Yeah. Like for example, Landmark Forum, there's a moment where you will, once you've changed a racket that you've been running, essentially, you have the opportunity. It's invited to make a repair with that individual. In anger management, when we have a slip and our behavior isn't ideal, we go back and we make a repair. And so these different courses that required that, or these programs or experiences that required that, had me returning to this place where I was having to make a repair with individuals. And prior to that, I just kept moving.
Yeah.
You just keep moving forward. And it's hard as a parent, for example, to go back, or even as somebody who's an authority, to go to a subordinate and say, I made a mistake. I'd like to repair this with you. It takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of leadership. It's something we don't see a lot. You don't see that a lot in politics.
Right.
How many times in politics they go back and say,
genuinely apologize.
We might have gotten that wrong. How many times do they go back and just say, yeah.
It's a bad choice.
Yeah.
Take responsibility for that.
I mean, as a teenager, I was like, really? Marijuana's illegal?
Yeah.
But you can buy all this other stuff?
Yeah.
Seems weird.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And nobody ever went back and said, yeah, maybe we didn't get that right. Well, so as parents, it's like, could we, one of the things that shifted for me, I should say, I shouldn't even speak, is, for me, what shifted is I began to go back and make these repairs, and there's something that happens when you face the person that you're making this repair with, and you start to think about how you would have handled it. If you were in what you would have liked to have done, right? Hey, I had a mistake on that. I made a mistake. Here's how I wish it had gone.
Yeah.
Can I try again?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden there's something for me that ended up shifting. Something inside of me shifted, and I slowly had to make fewer repairs, where I was having to make a repair, especially in anger management. I remember I was making 3 to 4 repairs a week.
Right.
Sometimes a day. I think when I first started, it was like I was having, I lost it again or whatever. But then it gets to this point where, for me now, and I'm not a perfect parent, which is what I was saying earlier, is like my batting average is more that .33, right? Sometimes a little better, depending on if I got sleep, food, if I took care of me.
Yeah.
Again, I have a big part of this, right? But my repair average of how many times I need to make a repair has gone way down.
Yeah.
But I think it was a result of me acknowledging the times I needed to and going ahead and stepping into that and growing into that.
Totally. Yeah, practicing it. I mean, that's one thing I feel I do very well with my son is when I behave in a way that is less than I could have, because I was triggered. I feel like I'm very solid at just taking responsibility around that, like just modeling that, like own the thing, and ask for forgiveness if need be, and then also just process through it and sort of help him understand that it's okay to be contrite and genuinely apologetic and acknowledge your screw ups, that's an important part of being a leader, of being an adult, of being, someone who models healthy behavior. And I feel that's like those are some of the most bonding times for us, where he can, because it's not just like, there's also a communication component, right? Where there's how did it get that way? How did this escalate? What did we do? What was our combined energy that sort of created this situation, right? And like, how can we both improve our communication skills and our, just all of the stuff? It's all the same things that we're talking about, but really having that conversation, and not feeling. I think I always felt like my mother. It was too vulnerable to show that she was ignorant or weak or inconsiderate, or like just vulnerabilities, like all these things that, character flaws that because she was the adult and because of her own parenting, she just always had to be right. It's kind of like, because I said so. And so, and I could clearly see that I'm like, I can see that you're not right in this situation, right? It's pretty obvious, and yet you're defending it. You're defending this behavior. And so even as a kid, I could see like, so, if Miles calls me out on something or I catch myself doing some, acting in a way that's coming from a triggered place. If I don't catch it then, I'm usually pretty good at catching it, after the fact. To, like you say, I think it's so important what you said there, really driving that point home. But close those loops, because they end up having to be closed in fucking therapy, 20 years from now, if you don't close them now. It's like cauterize the wound, and I think that's so powerful. We have to wrap up pretty soon, so one of the things I want to talk to you about before we go is the fishing adventure, because we're giving away this fishing trip, right? You come from a long line of outdoor advocates and adventurers and that sort of thing. You've got a long history of fishing, right, with your father and your brothers, and then hunting and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, one of the things I think we want to try and create around the Be Dadly brand is opportunities for kids to connect with their fathers in really awesome situations like fishing or, camping, whatever, backpacking, retreats, things like that, like outdoor adventure-oriented types of experiences where you can combine or connect with other fathers who are of the same mind, but also connect with your kid in a deeper way and really have carved out that time for this experiential memory-making opportunity that, in your day-to-day grind you might not normally get a chance to do. So talk me through that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the very short story for me is, like you said, my family is just a big and avid outdoorsman. That's one of the things that we grew up doing. It's some of our strongest memories. Yes. It taught us resourcefulness. It taught us, about nature. It taught us a lot. It taught us a lot of our character today. Yeah. And it also was something we enjoyed doing. Yeah.
And you still go out.
Oh my
gosh. Right? I know you go out with your brothers and you go out with your dad too. I go out with my son. I go out with my brothers. I go out with my dad. Yeah. Me and my son do it all the time. Yeah. And we're at Lake Travis. We're at Lake Decker. We do, we travel to the coast a lot. We love it. Yeah. And my son and I went out with him and his sons And we had an amazing time. And I fished as a kid, but never really learned to be a fisherman on any level. And so I was hanging out with him and his brother and our sons. And my son was just so stoked. He was like catching fish left and right, and he was just like on fire. He was saying, then when I would catch fish, he was celebrating and grabbing the net. Absolutely. And I mean, it's just such a beautiful memory to make with your kids. And from my perspective, like more of that, less of the other nonsense, as much as possible. So that was kind of the impetus for this. We did this trip, and I was like, other dads need to have this experience for sure. And so I hit him up with the idea of like, hey, we should do this giveaway. Like you got the skills, you could be a guide easily. And I kept looking, I was always down like on Craigslist or whatever, like looking for guides and just like, oh, that'd be fun to do. I should take Miles out and do that, blah, blah, blah. And then, here comes Brandon. He's got the skills, he's got the boat, he's got, the history of the experiential knowledge of the area, and him and his brother know where to go. And so it was just like a no-brainer. I'm like, God, we should just do this for a dad, make it a contest, So I'm so glad that you're open to that idea. I think that's going to be a really powerful thing and something that we can film and have as a memory and kind of just show like this is the sort of ecosystem we're sort of trying to create for dads. That mirrors our values, of personal growth. But not boring, sit in a classroom, conference room, taking notes, but like experientially, like, because man, you get out there, and I saw that with Brandon, with his son, you get out there and the weather was not fantastic. It was cold. His kid fell in the water. Like there was a lot of challenges, and this is a great opportunity to practice these skills that you learn through the course and through these other, the emails that you send out and all of that.
And part of the challenge becomes part of the story, right?
Totally.
Oh, remember when that happened? And, it's the ups and downs that really it's a microcosm of our life in so many ways. This fishing adventure, we're going to try to achieve something. We got all these big ambitions. We're met with all these challenges. Yeah. We have to discover, ways around things, and it's a whole thing. And I know you and I did it and was like, we got to replicate this for other people. Yeah. And I see us doing lots of these. I could honestly see us doing this either as an annual thing, a semi-annual thing, but taking these guys out there, we're giving them 2 nights on the coast, just like we had. You have 2 nights in an Airbnb. Yeah. You've got the boat for 2 days. Yeah. We're going to take you out. We're going to catch redfish, trout, flounder, whatever we can find. There's in the ocean, you never know what you're going to catch. There's all kinds of cool stuff out there. And we're just going to have a great time. Yeah. So February 1st is when we're announcing a winner.
The drawing, right?
Yeah, we're doing the drawing the night before, and then we're going to announce a winner February 1st. So
awesome. Yeah, that'll be great. Look forward to that, everybody. If you haven't signed up, sign up so that you can have a chance to win that.
The URL, if we want to throw that out there, is bedadly.com/fishing trip.
There it is. That's how you enter. Easy. When can we expect the course?
Yeah, the course is going to be released in February. We're going to launch in February, so that's also coming
And what's it
up.
called?
The name has not quite completely been
congealed yet.
Yeah, it hasn't been congealed. The content's there, but the name, still working on that one. But we're going to be offering a free class that is really an opportunity for you to get a window into some of it. Yeah. It is three shifts to revolutionize your parenting. Nice. And we're going to talk about these 3 simple shifts. They're very simple, but they're very profound on how you can change your awareness and your parenting. And that's a great gateway, I would say, into the content and also into the lessons with me. And from there, it'd be a good way to kind of decide whether this course is a good fit.
Yeah. Well, and if you're in the local Austin area, we'll probably be doing some live events because I think, there's so much you can get. And if you're really diligent, you can practice these things on your own. But when you can role play do these things in a live setting, I think that is going to be the icing on the cake. And plus, again, you get one of the things that's really important to us is like it's not just virtual knowledge, but like creating a community and an ecosystem of fathers supporting fathers helping each other sort of just level up all the time. And so that's really important. And that happens really face to face, not virtually. I find I prefer that. Some people can make that work, but there's nothing like really being in each other's presence.
That's totally true. And one thing, I'll add is on the course side, when we are doing the virtual course, we do have group sessions where we will be interacting much more. We can even do breakout rooms and things like that, which thank you Zoom for coming up with some of these ideas to really be able to hold a good experience, even though we're doing it virtually. Right. But like you said, it's going to be different live. And recently talked to a good friend of mine, and she runs a small community called Worldly Families. Oh, cool. And they're about helping people basically up-level their cultural competence. Okay. And they talk about all kinds of different cultures, from their eating and all kinds of different things, and also their child rearing and their different approaches. Totally. And we're going to do a joint collaboration, and I believe it's going to be the first week of March. Okay. If it's not the first week, it's going to be the next week right after. But we're going to hold a workshop. Yeah. And it's going to be really, really cool, a free workshop. So I think that's going to be awesome too.
Yeah, there's a lot coming up. So stay tuned. If you're not on the email list, get on the email list, because we got a lot of things coming down the pipeline this summer. It's going to be a great summer. A lot of good in-person events, a lot of online training. And
definitely stay tuned for the next
series, the podcast series. Yeah, we got a bunch of good guests sort of on the hook. Yep. Some commitments, some need to be pushed a little bit. And if you haven't listened to the previous podcasts, we've got 7 episodes of gold. So listen to that and subscribe. Do all those things that you need to do that help us do what we need to do. Absolutely. Right? We good?
You bet, dude. We're good.
And we're out.
All right, stay dadly.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you've received some value from it, please share it with other dads and consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform, and we'll see you in the next episode. Looking for support with your fatherhood journey? Go to bedadly.com and take our Dadly Disposition quiz and learn helpful insights on how you can overcome power struggles with your kids.